everyone. Today we're going to continue our conversation about the industrial age by focusing on industrial policies and leaders. In this mini lesson, we're going to look at some economic policies that changed during the industrial age, which was at the end of the 1800s and beginning in the 1900s before World War I. And then we're going to look at three important leaders that impacted the industrial age in one way or another. Today's learning target states I can describe the economic policies of the Second Industrial Revolution and some of the major leaders. For the purposes of the mastery check, you will be responsible for understanding the role and responsibility of Andrew Carnegie, Rockefeller, and then A. Philip Randolph, which will all be discussed within this mini lesson. So first of all, we're going to look at some economic policies. Just a reminder, the Industrial Revolution marked a transition from people predominantly farming to mainly working in the factories. Consequently, the country attempted to modernize the economy following the Civil War. So we start to see more and more people going to the factories and moving to the cities as a result of it. Next mini lesson, we'll look at urbanization, which is talking more about this idea of people flocking to the cities in order to get better jobs. In order to help to control this process, there were different tariffs that were put in place in order to promote Americanization of products. A tariff is an additional tax on imported goods or services from an outside country. This incentivized individuals throughout the United States to buy American-based products. This was especially important with the invention of the automobile, as well as other consumer goods within the Roaring '20s. So now we're going to look at some of the major leaders of this time period. A. Philip Randolph was a labor leader and a civil rights activist. While he's not as well recognized as other civil rights activists such as Martin Luther King Jr. or Malcolm X, a lot of historians actually consider him the founding father of the civil rights movement, which happened in the late 1950s to early 1960s. With his work, he not only focused on the importance of expanding the rights of African Americans, but he also worked on expanding the labor sector for both African Americans as well as poor white people. He advocated for fair wages, better working conditions, especially for African Americans. In order to do this, he organized the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters, which was the first African American based union. So, A. Philip Randolph actually has quite an extensive resume in terms of the things that he was fighting for. So, he did a lot of work with expanding the education system, expanding the funding for education, expanding the labor force, expanding the type jobs that African Americans had available, expanding how much poor laborers of all races were getting paid. But he also helped to organize the March on Washington. So, in the mini lesson, you're going to have the opportunity to look at one of his famous speeches, which was from the March on Washington, where you can see a lot of the ideas that he represented. At the time, labor unions were starting to develop in order to fight for different rights in terms of changing the labor conditions in terms of making things safer, shortening the working hours, and so on. We'll have a separate mini lesson on it. However, a majority of the labor unions that were developed during this point in history did not allow African American membership, so it was quite a big deal that he developed the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters because this was the first African American exclusive labor union organization, which then inspired others to form in other occupations. The next major influencer of the time we're going to look at is Andrew Carnegie. Andrew Carnegie revolutionized the steel industry. He did this by consolidating steel production into one company. This allowed him to increase efficiency because he basically had all the resources needed in order to produce the steel, and it also reduced the overall cost. There wasn't really a debate at the time that Carnegie was a very successful businessman. However, this began the discussion about concern about things like monopolies, which is when an individual or an individual company is owning basically all of the things required in order to produce a specific good or service, and consequently they're basically taking out the competition so that there's only one specific company producing a specific good or service, so then they have complete control of things like the cost of it, how much they're paying their workers and things like that. The other major name of the time period which furthered this concern was John D. Rockefeller Sr. So he founded the Standard Oil Company, which was a major oil company within the United States during this time in history. And he had a lot of the same business practices as Carnegie. However, there was additional concerns in terms of oil because oil is a natural resource. So a lot of the actions that Rockefeller took in terms of business impacted federal regulation of the economy, including putting different policies in place in order to ensure that monopolies could not form. So then the competition still existed within the economy, which allows for supply and demand to adjust the cost of goods or services. As more people want something, the price goes up. As less people want it, the price goes down. And if people aren't happy with a specific product, then they can buy it from one of their competitors. Under Rockefeller, there really was no one else producing oil, so that's what caused the additional concern at the government level. So these three leaders all had different roles in terms of the industrial age, but they're all people that influenced both legislation and the economy in one way or another.